Hello, hello. Welcome to My First Dollar. My name is Taryn Arnold. I am with Buy Me a Coffee, and I am so excited to be able to introduce to you all. Well, you might already know him. He is a self-appointed, but maybe podcast philosopher, the one and only Evo Terra. And the crowd goes wild.
Thanks for the introduction, Taryn. Oh,
how are you?
I'm doing well. I am doing, as well as can be. It's the end of 2020. It's been a year that all of us want to forget. So, in the grand scheme of things, I'm doing fine.
I love that. Can we have like a cheers? Do you have a drink with you?
I do.
Beverage?
Well, yes, I do. I'm going to drink water with you right now.
That. Cheers for you. I have water too. Sneak peek. I felt like I should have had coffee because it's Buy Me a Coffee, but I went with water.
I get it. My coffee drinking, I'm a big coffee fan. I love coffee. I'm a little bit of a coffee nerd in that I like coffee a certain way, and I actually like coffee, which means don't put anything in the coffee. I like coffee. It's good. But I really
only drink black.
I do.
Same.
Yeah, and preferably freshly ground and roasted by a few friends of mine who make really good coffee the way that I like it. And I'm weird. Most coffee nerds literally like to talk about the subtle flavors and the buttery and the acidity and the chocolate. No, I like black coffee that is so thick you can stand your spoon up.
I love that.
I had a guy in Thailand I was buying coffee from when I lived there for 2.5 years. He's a local roaster in Thailand, and he would roast coffee specially for me because I wanted it so dark. Anybody else in Thailand would say, no, too bitter. But I loved it that way. So I would just order coffee from him every couple of weeks and just say, order for Evo's Special Dark. And it would show up in the mail like 3 days later. Here you go. Here's your coffee, man.
So the original coffee subscription. I love that. So I always feel weird introducing creators because, you guys do things your own way and you probably don't call yourself a certain thing. But why don't you introduce yourself? Tell me and the audience a little bit about you and what you do on the internet.
Yeah, sure. I'm really good at getting into fights on the internet and winning, but that's really not what I do most of the time. My claim to fame on the internet is I'm one of the first podcasters ever. I had the 40th podcast on the planet. I was the co-host of back in October 14th, 2004. So I'm about to hit my 16th anniversary of being a podcaster. Yeah. And I've done a lot.
How did you get started? How did you get started so early? Like, I can't even imagine back then.
I got started in podcasting before there was a thing called podcasting. I was doing internet radio way back in the day, a couple of years before that.
Yeah.
And actually managed to parlay the internet radio show my partner and I were doing into becoming a terrestrial syndicated radio show. We even got on XM satellite radio.
And that was the big leagues back then.
Yeah, that was we thought we were going to be, that was it. We were going to be, syndicate this radio show and sell lots of advertising stuff. And then on October the 12th, 2004, my partner brings to me this article about podcasting. And he says, we should check out podcasting. And I immediately ignored it because that's not his job to look at the cool new tech stuff. That's my job.
You're like, you put this away, let me find it.
Yeah. But when I did look at it again 2 days later, I realized we were already doing all the things. We had a blog and we were embedding a media player using a real media player, I think it was called back in the day. Mm-hmm. We were doing all of this work. All I had to do was a little bit of tweaking, and I'm not a developer, a tiny amount of tweaking to our blog platform. This predates WordPress. We were using something called movable type way back in the day. And so all I had to do was connect the MP3 file that we already had to the RSS feed, and boom, we were podcasting. So when we went to podcasting, we already had a built-in audience of thousands of listeners. So we kind of cheated. And so that's how I got to be in it so quickly.
And what were you talking about back then? What was the topic? Were you guys just shooting the shit or?
A lot of that, but because we were trying to make a real radio program, our niche was interviewing science fiction authors. So I've had the privilege of interviewing Sir Arthur C. Clarke, Ray Bradbury, and several other, big name authors today, and also lots and lots of underprivileged, or not wrong way to say that, underpublished authors, I like to call them. Underpublished authors, who had good ideas, and some of them not so good ideas, but wanted to put a book out there. And you got to remember, this is early 2000s. This was before Amazon was selling ebooks. This was
Whoa.
before there was a Kindle, and certainly no Kindle direct publishing system. So back then, the only way that authors could make traction for themselves was getting a big publisher in New York to pick them up, which only works for what? 0.01% of the authors out there. They couldn't do a lot. So these small stations like we had, or small programs, we were the promotional outlet for these creators who wanted to get their message out there. So that's really what we were trying to do, is spread the message with good content, helping get a little promotion about that, and tell people about some great books they should be reading.
That's amazing. And then, so what happens next? Like, obviously podcasting takes off at some point here. Kind of walk me through the journey.
Yeah. So once podcasting hit, it didn't take long for me to start reaching out to some of the friends I had made in the publishing space, a lot of these underpublished authors again, and convince them that they should do something with podcasting. And 3 of them at approximately the exact same time all struck on the great idea of, why don't I, they said, make a podcast version of my book? I'll just read the book. I'll narrate the book into a microphone, one chapter at a time, and release it as a podcast. Can you help? And so I said, sure. So I coined the term Podiobooks, podcasting and audiobooks blended together, put together a website, Podiobooks.com, found a great developer, Chris Miller, and others who've helped over the years for that. And when I finally shut the site down in 2015, we had over 700 serialized audiobooks, mostly read by the authors in podcast form. We were pushing some 2-ish million downloads of our episodes every single month. It was pretty fantastic. Yeah. So that's how I really got deeply into the podcasting game. I started doing from 2005 to 2015. So a 10-year run of Podiobooks.com was the next big thing that I did.
So was Audible and audiobooks and all of that stuff happening in conjunction with you doing your bit? Wow.
Audible had been around for a while, but Audible was tough to get into because they only wanted big published authors. Amazon hadn't bought Audible yet. They were a separate company, and books on Audible were terribly expensive. If you could have your free book a month, but anything else you wanted to buy was like $60, $70. This was the era where audiobooks were made on CDs. You could go to a truck stop and buy a 12 CD set of, Dune by Frank Herbert, right? That's what people were listening to. And so when it all kind of blended together, one of the reasons we shut Podiobooks.com down was, while it's still a great resource, it happened before there were before there were ebooks. But as soon as Kindle said, hey, all you have to do is write words, send us a Word document, and in 5 minutes you'll have an EPUB file or a .mobi file or an ebook to read. That was a whole lot easier than, hey, write a book and now go spend 100 hours behind a microphone narrating it, editing it down, making it sound nice. That's a lot of work, as any podcaster will tell you, any audiobook producer will tell you. It's a lot easier to do it the other way. So interest really dropped. But at the same time, podcasting was skyrocketing, and I pivoted now. I work full time in podcasting. My only job is making podcasts for clients all around the world these days. So it's been a great run for me in my tenure of the podcasting world.
Yeah. So what's been happening from 2015 till the doomed year of 2020? Like you said, you're focusing on helping clients create and market podcasts?
Well, so parallel to my life in the podcasting space, outside of that, but alongside of that, I was running digital advertising agencies.
Oh, wow.
So but the great thing about being a VP at an ad agency is you don't really have a lot to do. There's a lot of free time. And I was the vice president of media and innovation for my last agency, so I could justify spending a lot of time figuring out what this podcasting thing was all about.
Yeah.
So in 2016, I found myself living in Bangkok, Thailand. It was a fun thing to do. My wife was the principal of a private school in Thailand, and I was sitting around with not a lot to do. And a few people who knew about me and podcasting said, would you help me launch a podcast? And so I did. And I was like, that's kind of fun. Here's an idea. What if, because now all the businesses suddenly were thinking, ooh, this podcasting is a new thing. And while I had actively resisted being a podcast consultant, because who the heck am I to tell somebody, what their hobby show for Boston Terriers should sound like? I don't really care. Do whatever you want to do. Why are you paying someone to do this, right? But businesses said, hey, we're going to do podcasting. We don't know what we're doing. I know from running an agency, businesses love to spend money to hire other agencies who do the things they don't want to learn how to do. Yep. So I started working with businesses because businesses have budgets. businesses don't really have a creative vision the way that normal human beings have a creative vision. They got some business results they want to get, and they really don't know where to get started. So the focus of my business for the first few years was doing just that. You've got a business, you want a podcast, I will give you everything you need to do to get that done. Here's the format, here's the setup, here's the process you go through, and we'll just make podcasts in conjunction with you where you don't have to worry about any of the other stuff that happens. That's how I really got into the podcast consultancy. I've had a little bit of a pivot on that lately. Now I've got some larger scale clients, and we are doing some really fun, creative, interesting projects with big budgets behind them to really capitalize on the way podcasting has evolved. There are still plenty of fun hobbyists who are talking about Boston Terriers in their basement. Sure, it still happens. We always want that to happen. But there are also a lot of companies now really investing serious cash to make a product that is really going to reach a much larger audience. So it's been a fun evolution.
Why do you think podcasting took off the way that it did? Like, why are businesses and people and everybody turning to podcasting?
Well, the funny thing is, podcasting barely took off. If you look at all of the other mediums that are out there, from radio and television and print to social media and whatever, it's one of the slowest growing mediums we've seen. It's been really, really slow. And I've got plenty of reasons why I think that was the case, but it kind of doesn't matter because I don't have a time machine and we couldn't go back and fix these things. But what I think has happened since around 2014 is a lot more attention has been paid to the podcasting space because of the quality of content has gone up drastically. We've had shows like Serial that have come on that have finally, well, I shouldn't say finally, once again captured the media's attention just as they happened in previous years. But this time it's stuck. And that's because people are walking around with podcast listening devices in their pockets right now. Back in 2004 when we got started, it was a nightmare. It was a series of crazy steps to listen to a podcast. Well, now it's a click of a button, especially with Spotify now, push button, listen, right? It's all there. So when businesses started looking at this again, seriously, now that the barrier to entry was dropped, that's what got them excited. And they said, hey, here's a way for us to publish something that we don't have another outlet for. This isn't a book. This is not a YouTube channel. This isn't a radio show. It's something else. It's an ability for us to really connect with customers or prospects and showcase who we are. We always want to publish as a business, but we've never had a place. Maybe our blog, but come on, that's terrible. So I think podcasting just naturally took off, and we're seeing really good growth in it right now, which makes me excited.
That's awesome. So tell me, and then you have your own show after all of this, and maybe many, I actually don't know, but I know you have one. Tell me about that show. Yeah.
Well, I did a presentation back before everything shut down, and I counted up 19 different podcasts that I have been either the host or co-host of since 2004.
That makes sense for you.
Yeah. So of the ones I have working right now, my flagship show, if you will, is called Podcast Pontifications, and it comes out every single day. And it does not. Every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I have 4 days a week. I put out this show. I do it live, and it's a 10-minute long program that gets into the philosophy of podcasting. There are lots of podcasts about podcasting that tell you 101 level how to do things and what microphone to buy and these things. That's not what I do in my show. My show really is designed for working podcasters who want to make podcasting better. What I try to do with every one of my shows is bring to the audience a topic that every podcaster should know about. Not necessarily how to do things, but more what they should be thinking about, what the future is going to hold, and how changes that we're already seeing in podcasting might evolve and continue on through. Again, it's a philosophical dive in the world of podcasting for working podcasters. So rather niche, I think.
Yeah. So what was today's episode? Like, what's something that you feel like people need to know right now in the podcasting world?
Today's episode was all about we need to stop giving so much, any credence to the concept of downloads. Downloads are as meaningless in podcasting as hits were to websites, back in the 1990s. We need to get past that because we have this insane notion that somehow downloads will tell you how fast a show is growing and how big the audience is and all sorts of things. And then it does none of those things. It does nothing about that. So I broke it down about what the problem really is and offered some solutions. Not necessarily how to do those things, but some solutions of other metrics we might be looking at, which will give us better indications of growth, of size of our audience, of engagement, even of advertising dollars. There's a lot of sweeping changes coming. So I really went into a deep dive on all that today.
Well, that's a perfect little tease for someone to go listen and check that out. That is awesome. You said that, like, I saw on your Buy Me a Coffee page, you want to make podcasting better for all working podcasters.
Yeah.
Why is that, two-part question, why is that a passion for you? And then what constitutes a working podcaster versus somebody in their bedroom that's just cranking out content?
Yeah, let's take those backwards. I mean, I think you've done a nice job of describing that. Podcasting is an open medium. Anybody can podcast whatever they want to. So there's the hobbyists, the people that are just trying to have fun and do something, and that's fine. But they're not really interested in growth. They're not interested in making something better. They might become that way, but for right now, it's fun. It's just an interesting thing to do, right? It's like having an Instagram channel, right? Not everybody's going to monetize their Instagram channel and get a lot of money. Maybe they have dreams about that, but come on, let's face it. Most people aren't ready to put in the work, of taking fake pictures of themselves on fake airplanes to get the really, really, big audiences. And it's the same thing. That's all I do.
That's my whole feed.
And to me, it's the same thing for podcasting. Most podcasts just are there to have fun. Now, the flip side of that, why I want to make podcasting better is, I'll just say it, most podcasts, and I recognize that I haven't listened to all of them, but there are 1.5 million podcasts out there, and most of them suck.
Yeah.
Most of them but that's because most of them aren't designed to reach a big audience or even a niche audience in the certain style that they want to. Look, most artists suck. Go to your local art walk and look around, and it's mostly garbage, right? That's fine. That's what are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
That's Sturgeon's law. 95% of everything is crap. So my goal with this is for the working podcasters who either have a show that they've been able to monetize or have found a way to make money doing it, or have aspirations to really, truly make this a going concern. Maybe it's not their full-time job, but enough of a more of a avocation, certainly a vocation for them. I want them thinking about better ways to do things. That's how we make podcasting better, is by educating the people who are wanting to be serious about podcasting and giving them an alternative voice to here's the cheapest microphone and here's the fastest way to get started and all that. Okay, those are all valid points, but who's thinking about the best way to do things and really improving overall quality so that the next time somebody randomly stumbles into a podcast for the first time, they actually have a really good experience and not just saying, why is somebody screaming into a microphone from across the room? That's not very good. So that's what we're trying to do.
I love that. You're trying to help there be less shitty podcasts out in the world, which I'm with you. So on your site, I saw that you have like a full section on podcast monetization and making money doing this. Tell me a little bit about your journey with making money as a podcaster and helping other people do the same. I've
been really fortunate in that the money that I've made from podcasting has not been from a podcast, but because of my involvement in podcasting. I mean, the first real money I earned in podcasting was when I was asked to write Podcasting for Dummies back in 2005. I was paid to do that because I had a certain amount of expertise. And nowadays,
did you really write that book?
Yeah, I'm one of the first authors of Podcasting for Dummies. It's coming out now in its 4th edition. I'm not the author of the 4th edition. My original co-author, T. Morris, is, and a good friend of mine, Chuck Tomasi, took over my job when I said, I've had enough of this writing stuff. But yeah, so I mean, that's how I made my first dollar in podcasting. And the way I made my next dollar in podcasting was going to conventions around the world and conferences and marketing events, talking about podcasting and getting paid to be a keynote presenter around the world. And today I make my living in podcasting as a creator by charging companies to do podcasting for them, to act as they're outsourced. So many podcasters, when they think about monetization, they think about one of two things. One is, let's sell advertising. And number two is, let's get people to directly support us. And both of those suffer from a common problem: scale. Because only a small fraction of the people who listen to your podcast will become your direct supporter. I am living proof of that. I'm trying to think how many podcasts I've had that have had a direct sponsor relation or direct support relationships. It's got to be at least 5 or 6. And all of them, I'm lucky if a single-digit percentage of my listeners will ever support me. Quite often, there's a decimal in front of that single digit, which,
Mm-hmm.
really starts to, if you have 100 listeners and if 1% support you, that's one, So,
Yeah.
and since most podcasts barely break 100 listeners, not always the smartest thing. Advertising is a similar model, but worse. Hey, I can get money if I read someone's ad on my show. Well, yeah, but how much money do you get when you really do that for a regular show? It comes out to pennies. If maybe you're lucky to get dollars a month. So it works when you've got a gigantic audience, when you're pushing out lots and lots of content to lots and lots of people. But most podcasters don't. So those two models of monetization, real true monetization, don't really work out well for most podcasters.
So what do you say then if I'm a podcaster and I've been chugging along for a few years and I've got a pretty good audience and I want to start making this, I want to quit my job and I want to run with podcasting as my full-time gig. What advice would you give me?
Break out your calculator and see if it makes sense. Because unless you're talking about tens of thousands of downloads, and I know I just said earlier that I hate the download word, and I still hate it, but it's what we have to deal with today.
Yeah.
But if your podcast is generating tens of thousands, and maybe let's say it's 50,000, right? That's a good number. 50,000 downloads. Well, you'd be one of the top 1% of podcasters ever, because most get nowhere near that. And then you might start making a few $1,000s a month to make it a going concern. There might be enough money from advertising if you can attract them, if you can get them to do it, to actually run your show. But most podcasters don't get that. Yeah. And I've got shows that I help that have, probably 8,000 to 12,000 downloads on their shows, and they're lucky if they get an advertising deal once every 2 or 3 months for $150 or so.
Oh, wow.
It's really hard to run a business when your income flow is $150 a month, which is why I say break out your calculator. Before you make that jump, do some basic, simple math to find out what's it going to be like for you. What is the true revenue potential? It's just like running any business. Just do the math, put the numbers together and see if it's really going to work for you or not. And if it's not, if advertising is not working, I love the direct support model. I think that's a great way to do it. But you've also got to find other ways to make money. And maybe that's by selling products directly. If you're a business, why would you want to run advertising on your podcast? Chances are, if you're a business, you have a business website, I'll bet you don't have ads on your business's website, do you? Probably not. So why are you trying to shove ads in your business podcast? No, get more people to do things for you. Monetization, to me, means a lot more than just running ads or convincing people to give you $5 on Buy Me a Coffee, which, by the way, if you want to, buymeacoffee.com/Evo Terra, you can give me $5.
There we go.
Feel free to do that. But to me, it's all about finding additional ways to bring income in with the show, helping you do that.
Got it. And so for you, when you say that audience support isn't massive for you, why still put yourself out there on Buy Me a Coffee or these other like direct support platforms if you know that it's maybe not worth it? Or is it worth it in other ways?
I think it's worth it in other ways. And also, look, it's worth it because it's really simple. It takes, as you know, Taryn, it takes no time, minutes, literally, to set up a Buy Me a Coffee page or any of the other competing services out there. It's really straightforward to do.
Super.
When I have done it previously, I've said, well, I'll do perks and all the other various things, thanks to the Kickstarter model that we've all gotten into. That gets problematic because if I set up a tier to where if you give me $10 a month, I will give you extra content, I got to do extra content. And these 10-minute episodes I do 4 days a week take me 3.5 hours each. 3.5 hours each. So do I want to do extra content to get an extra $10 from 4 people? I'll answer that question for you. No, absolutely not. But it is a nice way for people who are enjoying the show, who listen on a regular basis, to say, all right, it's worth a couple shekels here and there to help with that. It's a nice thing to have. I don't rely on it as my primary income stream. I don't really focus on it. I mean, I mention it once at the end of every single program. Occasionally, if somebody supports me on Buy Me a Coffee, I always tweet out the card that Buy Me a Coffee gives with some little snarky comment and a request for someone to also subscribe if they want to, have me say nice things about them too. So those things work, and because it's low effort, and still looks good, I think it's important to me. Other shows, other podcasts, other creatives who have larger audiences, who aren't maybe quite as dialed in as niche, who are providing additional services, I think this direct support model is a great way to really do more for the audience that cares. So I'm not poo-pooing it at any stretch. It's just where I'm at, it's a different situation.
What do you think makes it work for others? Like what's the secret sauce of being able to make a good chunk of your revenue pie from direct support?
Yeah, the biggest thing you have to do is twofold. One, you got to have an audience. Yeah. So many people get into this and they say, I'll use Patreon, or I'll use Buy Me a Coffee, or I'll use whatever to help grow an audience. And they don't do that. That's not what they're there for. They just don't have a model to do that. You have to have an audience first and foremost. So one, have a big enough audience. Two, make such great quality content that they can't get it anywhere else, that it's worth paying for. But you have to do both of those things before it becomes a real going concern. So my focus has been, look, I know I'm never going to have a giant audience. This is a small niche that I've carved out for myself, and I am totally happy and fine with that. But I want to make good enough content to where it might be worth supporting for the handful of listeners that I actually have. So you got to do both. Build a big audience first, and then make really great content.
Awesome. And then you said, like, you've talked obviously a lot about how so much of your business is on the consulting side and helping other businesses podcast. What advice would you have to someone that's a podcaster and is curious about getting started on the consulting side? What would you say to help them get started?
I would say, because there's a lot of people out there who need help at a lot of different levels, keep that in mind. So while someone like me, who's been doing this forever, who's got also 20 years of biz op experiences, I can go to gigantic corporations and say, yes, I know what it's going to take to run your podcast, right? I'm playing at the top levels, but people need help and are willing to pay for help all the way down. To me, equate it to sports. Pick whatever sport you want. Pick baseball, because everybody understands baseball. I don't even like baseball, but I understand it. Look, not everybody can be a coach or a player in the that's the MBA major. No, but
MLB.
MLB. There we go. See, I'm not a really big fan of MLB, right? It's been a while since sports has been on too. So not everybody can play there, but people can play AAA ball. People can play other places. And then think about all the people who have 9-year-old kids who will pay a hitting coach to train their 9-year-old kid. People need help and are willing to pay for help. Businesses are willing to pay for help. I know that too, at every single level. So don't assume that it means you have to go after the big guys. There are a lot of needs for a lot of services at a lot of different levels in the podcasting world. Find out what you're really good at and what particular audience you think you can do that for, and go for it. There's plenty of room for all of us.
Wow. Great advice. Last question before I let you go on the rest of your day would be, if you've been through podcasting in every way. Before it, you're in it. You've seen the whole thing. If somebody wanted to get started today, I want your advice, but not from the get this microphone side. I want it from like the high God side of podcast philosophy.
Sure. Yeah. Make sure why you're getting into it. With every client I've had, with the more than 24 clients I've worked with for the several years, and probably well beyond that, but just currently, every single one of them have told me the exact same thing. Now, remember, my company does most of the work. We do all the technical behind the scenes stuff, and we only give the clients, we only make them do things that they need to do. Things like talking to a microphone, because I'm not that good at impersonations. So I really can't pretend to be the CEO of some, electric car company. Yeah. But they've all told me the same thing at some point in time during our relationship. And that is, I had no idea how much work this takes.
Yeah.
Now remember, we're doing most of the work, but it still takes an insane amount of time. People are under the wrong impression that somehow there's a relationship between the length of time it takes to listen to a podcast and the time it takes to make a podcast. And it's totally not true. It's just like movies, television, books, anything. There's a lot of effort that you don't see that goes into it. So feel free to start your hobby and have fun with it, but make sure you carve out enough hours. And I mean hours per episode, probably double-digit hours per episode every single week. If you don't have 15 hours a week of free time, you're probably not going to do your podcast for very long.
Right.
Just the reality of things.
Yeah. So just know what you're getting into before you hop into it.
Eyes wide open.
I love that. Well, cool. Tell us something that you're excited that you're working on right now and where people can find you.
Yeah, find me all over the place, but my primary haunt these days is Twitter. I'm an old school Twitter user and still do, so you can go to Twitter, and I'm Evo Terra, simple enough, over there. We mentioned Podcast Pontifications. That's the show that takes every morning of mine for 4 days a week at least. Podcastpontifications.com is the fun place for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Evo. Can we end it with our water cheers?
Cheers. In fact, we can.
For two people that love coffee, we're really dumb.
Yeah. What are you going to do? Blame my kidney stones for me.
Okay, well, I don't have that to blame it. Blame it on 2020 for me.
Yeah. I'm blaming the kidney stones on 2020, so why not?
Okay, there we go. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Evo.
Thanks, Taryn.
Hello. Welcome to my first dollar. My name is Taryn Arnold. I am with Buy Me a Coffee, and I am so excited to be able to introduce to you all. Well, you might already know him. He is a self-appointed, but maybe podcast philosopher, the one and only Evo Terra. And the crowd goes wild.
Thanks for the introduction, Taryn.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I am doing, as well as can be. It's the end of 2020. It's been a year that all of us want to forget. So, in the grand scheme of things, I'm doing fine.
I love that. Can we have like a cheers? Do you have a drink with you? Some sort of beverage?
Well, yes, I do. I'm going to drink water with you right now.
Cheers for you. I have water too. Sneak peek. I felt like I should have had coffee because it's Buy Me a Coffee, but I went with water.
I get it. My coffee drinking, I'm a big coffee fan. I love coffee. I'm a little bit of a coffee nerd in that I like coffee a certain way, and I actually like coffee, which means don't put anything in the coffee. I like coffee. It's good. But I really
only drink it black.